Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead at Sports Pro Media, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, it might feel like, a bit of nothing to a regular person, but I'm currently recording from the office, not on my normal, home office setup. And the way the table's set up, I've got the mic coming from my left. It usually comes from my right. And I'm just feeling a little off about it, Nick. Like, I'm just not sure how it's going to impact performances today.
I'm going to wait for you during the pod to start leaning towards it or away from the mic as it throws you out of whack. No, it is really interesting. I actually thought about this the other day, noticed that you have it on the same side as me. And I was actually thinking consciously the other day about how it would feel moving it across. I definitely think it would feel foreign for it. At the moment, I have my mic on a stand that is stretched as far as humanly possible from the other side of the table. And notice that every time, for those that do get to see the video clips, I don't know if we publish the videos online of the full pod, but the audio is every time I bump the table, everything moves quite vigorously. So I have to be very careful about what I do with my setup. So, which hopefully, I'll might have to upgrade it at some stage because it is getting a bit repetitious.
Well, the thing is, like an athlete, I am very conscious and I've got these sort of superstitions. In baseball, you never step on the foul line. And when I was playing basketball, I always had the same free throw routine. If I was playing baseball and I was shooting sunflower seeds and I got a hit, I would shoot sunflower seeds the next time I went up. But if I didn't get a hit, I would switch over to bubble gum and I would kind of go back and forth. So I am a bit of a sort of a superstitious person. So, having the mic on the other side, it's going to be one of those things that I'm going to have to find a way to overcome the challenges put in front of me and still perform at a high level.
Who knows? Maybe the mic's been on the wrong side the whole time. It's been holding you back. Maybe. Your best work is yet to come. I remember you see a lot of athletes with those quirks. Normally they happen quite a lot before matches where they have routines that they follow. You hear a lot about it in the NFL and the NBA in particular in sports, but I'm sure it's prevalent pretty much everywhere. And some of them are real OCD about where they put their shoes, where they put their socks as they're putting them on, which foot to do first, etc. I remember one weird quirk that an athlete used to do, which is I've never seen it again since, is in tennis. And that is when Goran Ivanisevic, who was a Croatian serving machine for those that aren't familiar with him, who ended up winning Wimbledon against an Australian. That's probably why it's etched in my brain. But every time he hit an ace, he wanted those balls back. He wanted the ball back that he hit the ace with, which, it makes sense, but it's actually quite a faff if that happens for them to pass the ball all the way around the court just to get to him to serve, which is normally never done. So I don't know if that's even legal anymore, but sometimes it would take quite a long time to get back. And now they have actual shot clocks on servers once the point's over for them to serve. So sometimes you can't keep those routines no matter how much you want, but he was quite a character.
Yeah, well, in the words of Santana Moss, I think I saw the quote the first time in the 30 for 30 documentary, It's All About the U, which is a great sports documentary if you've never seen it. He goes and says, big time players make big plays in big games. So you know what, Nick, we just got to find a way to overcome. We can't let those things set us back. We just got to go out and put on MVP level performance, go win a championship.
Let's go.
So, Nick, one of the things you and I haven't done, we've had a few exciting episodes here recently, and, I enjoyed the time we spent with Steve last week. But we've actually not spent a lot of time talking about some of the recent news. And over that time, a lot of things have come through. A lot of things have come from stories that we've covered in the past. We've got quite a few list of things to jump into. So we're going to run through quite a few things today, but we'll kick things off and we'll talk a little bit about the NFL to begin things. And one of the stories we followed seemingly not all that long ago, I think we first covered it at our Sports Pro New York event not too long ago, talking about the partnership that they were going to sign with Skydance. And this was part of this idea to create more non-live content. They were the studio that's done the Top Gun movies. They wanted to create all this extra content. And now there's talks of, sort of different mergers, acquisitions, Skydance and alongside Redbird are looking at potentially taking over a part of Paramount, who's already got the deal with CBS for the NFL. So that's kind of in the move. But the NFL is potentially looking at, selling its stake in Skydance. So it's also looking at potentially selling off NFL Media. NFL Media, they've got their own, 24-hour news content channel. They produce arguably one of the greatest sports shows in the world, which is NFL Red Zone. And, we've heard about the NFL looking at potentially parting ways with NFL media, but it does seem like it's starting to pick up a little bit of steam, and some of it might finally be coming to a head. So, Nick, like I said, there's a few different things, moving parts here, but kind of the key part is what's going to end up happening with the NFL media. So maybe just from your perspective, Nick, what do you make of all these different moving pieces?
It is really a bit of a game of chess. I'm not sure if you call it chess or checkers, but it is. There's a lot going on. A lot of different pieces moving into different places. Selling stakes, aggregation. I mean, it's a bit confusing to all follow. I do think there's a couple. You sort of have to compartmentalize a bit to get our heads around it, because even I'm struggling to do that a little bit. When I hear about someone like Paramount Global, I think a really major media business, one of the biggest in the world. And then to hear that you're talking with Redbird Capital, which is a pretty major investor in sports and media, but not one of the biggest in the world, but obviously they're able to raise the finance to come to the table. And Skydance it's a media production business. So for them to be able to come in and go after actually a major platform and own the platform and broadcaster like Paramount is quite a surprise to me in terms of the scale. Maybe it's not as surprising to others in the know and in the game, but it still feels like it's quite a significant situation to play out. So I do think that's just be fascinating to see if all of that comes together, because it would just be interesting how, particularly we've talked about before, where Paramount's been investing loads in marketing of Paramount Plus. Does that continue to be a bedrock of this new business and this new future, or does that absolutely change tack? And the other bit, the Skydance part you talked about, is the fact that they had a relationship, a pretty major relationship with the NFL in place. Now, looking at some of the numbers there, I think the reports where the NFL had invested 45 million, or basically to buy or own 45% of a joint venture between Skydance Media and NFL Media called Skydance Sports. And that still runs today and is an interesting proposition, creating a whole host of non-live, scripted and unscripted content, which is a really important differentiator, being that you think about like box to box, in theory, what people might say is it's unscripted, where they do both scripted and unscripted. So, for example, they did the Jordan movie, which is a scripted show. Was that with Ben Affleck in it, I believe, was the CEO. I've forgotten his name. The guy who founded it and led that, and also it was built around Jordan, but it was really interesting how they used his likeness. Have you seen that movie at all?
I have not, no.
You should see. It's really interesting because basically it's all about how the relationship with Nike came about, was basically the premise of the whole story. And so what's really interesting is you never see Jordan's face through the whole show. They show different angles of him, but in the whole show, he's never part of it. So the show is about Nike more than it is Nike and the birth of the Air Jordan brand, less about Jordan itself. It's really interestingly done. But anyway, that's their type of stuff they do. And they also do the more traditional documentary style storytelling. And I've seen a few other stories that are in a mix. I've spoken to StreamTime Sports myself, and it is quite a cool approach. They are really looking to open up the playbook there. So I really like what the Skydance Sports proposition is trying to do. I don't know why NFL would now try and exit that already. It feels very soon in the mix. So I'm very surprised that they would consider that, where obviously their play here is, I'm guessing it's directed by the owners, is they want to have a stake in all these assets. So I don't know. I don't know what you think, but I think for me, that's a really interesting move when they're mixing between selling all these assets all of a sudden, when they've been building major licensing deals, and they have this NFL media proposition on the side, which for me, it feels like the NFL has to have its own way of going to market, to talk to its audiences, and not just rely on third parties to do it.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, obviously I'm the hardcore fan. So I'm the person that is watching the NFL Network in the middle of May when nobody else is. And I think that's unique to have that. And I think one of the things I've always talked about, the reason why the NFL is king compared to everybody else, is that it really is a content first business. I've made this, example before. Football has Fabrizio Romano posting stuff on Twitter. The NFL has the NFL Network, which is 24/7, 365. They've got Hard Knocks, happening during the season. They've got quarterback and receiver coming out. I already talked about, I think Red Zone is the greatest sports package in the world. Like, that is all stuff that, is kind of worked through from the NFL media side. And I think the NFL's ability to not be solely reliant on its live sports rights compared to pretty much every other sport is what makes it as great as it is. So let's put it this way, as successful as they've been, you have to think that there's a plan or there's a reason behind it. They're not just doing it for no reason. But I think the NFL media is such a unique proposition where I appreciate it may not work for everybody, but like I'm always surprised like the Premier League doesn't have anything like this. Like I know Sky Sports has a Premier League channel, but I don't think it's got the level of input the NFL has on the NFL media production side. And like it does always surprise me that more of these, which you would consider the top leagues, don't have something a little bit more akin to this.
Yeah, I just feel like, particularly with the NFL, they're not in need of money. It's a billionaire business owned by a bunch of billionaires. And I always think that, if someone looks and reflects at some of the big, let's say the big media tycoons that have existed in the world over decades and generations, some might say they fit a similar bill to the types of billionaires that might run clubs and teams. And one of the powerful things about owning a really meaty media offering is can control the narrative, can build audiences, can tell the stories you want to tell. And I feel like in this day and age more than ever, with social media's power, the different platforms and ways you can go to market, having an asset like that, it must be super valuable, even if it's not just driving pure revenue return. But we do know the NFL is as big a business and as good at selling and splicing and dicing rights and opportunities to monetize as anyone in the game. But yeah, I really don't. I get why they would, but I don't get why they would. If you know what I mean, I get the logic about why they might sell it. Everything's available at the right price, but I still feel that they would want to have their own ways of marketing and producing the content and the stories they want to tell to basically drive, the narrative, the relationship with fans further than anyone else could, because they've got such a really powerful way to market.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. But speaking of people with deep pockets, they seem to keep popping up with more and more news. And we'll talk about, Saudi and the PIF fund. And it's purported that they are now going to be going in to try to potentially purchase a minority stake within the streaming platform DAZN, looking at approximately $1 billion. That aligns with around the $10 to $12 billion valuation that DAZN has for itself. So approximately, using some basic maths, about a 10% stake in the business itself. Obviously, we know DAZN has been around for a while now, been a disruptor. It's got a bit of a market-to-market strategy, and some places have been more successful than others. And they're growing and they're strategic, but this would certainly be a whole new different ball game. There's the DAZN side of things, and then I think there's also just we've continued to see Saudi and PIF pushing different things, trying to gain more influence and using sports as a way to do so. So, Nick, like I said, I think there's two different kind of angles to go about this story. A, from a DAZN perspective, in terms of where they're trying to get to. Does this make sense as part of their plan? And then the other side, more just Saudi's general approach to trying to use sports.
Yeah, completely. Well, let's take it from the Saudi side first. I think, for me, we're expecting all these extra moves to happen, with the launch of Surge, which is a special fund that's been dedicated to invest into sports. It's led by Danny Townsend, who's a fellow Aussie who's leading that charge, but he's got quite a war chest to go to market with, and they're already making investments into the sports space. That's a sports-specific offering. And then you got PIF, who's basically the parent umbrella to all that, who's led on the Live deal is probably the major marker that everyone's familiar with. What's really, I guess, interesting to follow their approach is I've kind of been waiting for the next big move. And I'm not even sure in the grand scheme of things, when you talk about Saudi, is this a big move in their books or not? But they really are made for each other a little bit. Saudi wants investments, major investments in the market that have potentially a positive return in the future. They want to create platforms that reach scale audiences, help them tell the stories that they want to tell about Saudi Arabia and do that at scale to global markets. A platform like DAZN has huge reach, and that's a great way from a marketing perspective, of also telling the stories of some of PIF's assets. What is interesting to see is that DAZN has already announced they've been doing several deals with Saudi Arabian-based organizations. You have the Saudi Pro League. They've done a major deal, which is, I think, they're the exclusive global partner for and broadcaster in the MENA region. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the deal. Then they have some of the major boxing events that they've been running in Riyadh in partnership with Matchroom. That's been happening for a while now. We've seen some incredibly massive fights there. And then they even brought a fight to Wembley, but had it sponsored by Riyadh Seasons, which is another entity out of Riyadh that has now announced a new partnership, which is a multi-year global one, to be basically the primary sponsor and brand partner on DAZN platforms, are actually visible on the operating system, the homepage, basically, when you go onto numerous operating systems or smart TVs, and a lot more. So they're made for each other, they're made for each other. They're already working together. Saudi Arabia is looking for new investments, and you look at the DAZN side, and then DAZN have been hemorrhaging money on the investments they've made in rights. They're projecting, and they have been for some time, that this is the year that they're going to become profitable. We'll have to see if that actually plays out. We're yet to see any numbers, and there is some creative accounting that you can definitely make that work, even if you're not quite there, depending on who you want to show those accounts to. But they are trending in the right direction and have been for some time. But they still have they've got a lot of money, a lot of people that have put a lot of cash into the table, Len Blavatnik, etc. They have to start paying back some of those debts. If you're paying bank loans at a high premium that they might be paying, that's a good way to just get rid of those costs and instantly make the business more profitable as well. So DAZN, it'll be a healthy investment for them, a much needed one, a much needed cash injection if they can get the deal across the line. A great platform for PIF and indeed for some of the assets coming out of Saudi Arabia. So it feels like it's almost inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, from DAZN's perspective, it's going to be hard, I think, to turn down that degree of money and that degree of support. And from the Saudi Arabia perspective, I won't make things political or anything like that, but it's a great opportunity, right? And I think one of the things I talk about with sports with people is it's the great equalizer. We think about, we've had the Olympics this summer, whether you're white, black, brown, yellow, pink, green, whether you're male, female, old, young, rich, poor. Sports is kind of the one thing that everybody can rally behind. And, without going to my own personal feelings towards it, if there was any way you think you could get in to something in an organic manner, sports just perfectly aligns with that. And, if you want to build positive sentiment, sports makes a ton of sense to do it in that regard. And I did confirm it, Nick. I had a quick little look on our friend ChatGPT. DAZN does have the rights for the Saudi Pro League and, multiple different nations. So as you say, they're already working together. So why not just make that union a little bit stronger?
And look, they're obviously planning to have the World Cup there in the future, having major events, and then having a partnership with a platform with DAZN. Let's face it, if you look across the world, which one partner can give them the proper global reach that they can? I mean, it's only the big tech companies like YouTube that could probably give them that sort of opportunity, and that sort of deal is never going to happen. So they are really best fit for each other in that instance. One needs cash, and it's a good stepping stone for them to potentially IPO in the future, is still planned. The other needs assets, needs opportunity to reach wider audiences, and they're already working closely together. This is kind of, I think, the next natural step for them.
Yeah, well, speaking of DAZN, we'll continue to stick with them. And, part of their cash flow might have been one of the reasons this is even a story. But we kind of followed along that in Germany, they had filed a complaint from a legal perspective saying that unfair processes had taken place in order for the Bundesliga to go and award Sky, the winners of that recent round of bids in terms of who would win the rights in Germany to the Bundesliga. And it appears, though, at this moment that the courts have at least are going to make the Bundesliga reopen up that process in terms of going about, trying to go about getting a tender. And part of that was that apparently that Sky had bid 300 million euros less than what DAZN did. And they felt a bit that was unfair, that they hadn't received it. Part of that was as though apparently DAZN maybe perhaps wasn't paying up on their set of the agreement, which, getting $1 billion cash funding to you might help support on that. But Nick, we've been following this, and this wouldn't necessarily be the first time a rights holder has taken less money because they thought that the additional value, we've talked about Formula One in the US deciding to stick with ESPN over Amazon. There are business cases, or even more recently with the NBA deciding to move on from TNT and go on to Amazon. There are reasons why this happens. Is this a positive sign for DAZN? Do you really think it's going to massively change what the overall outcome would be? But just given we've now got a little more information on this story.
Yeah, I'm really, really fascinated to see what does happen next, because you've got what's happened in other Western markets to look at and think, Is that what has perhaps led to some of the decision making by the Bundesliga? And equally, what has led to where we are today and potentially what might happen given changing tides? And now let me explain. So firstly, one of the concerns, I'm speculating here, I don't know enough of the detail, but let's say the question you have to ask is why on earth would the Bundesliga accept such a lower price deal? Now, because what they say, and sometimes the reasons why aren't always the same, but their points are that some of the money wasn't paid in time. There's also the extra exposure Sky gives them. But that sort of price point is a pretty significant difference. It's probably the greatest I could ever think of that I've heard in market since I've been in the sports industry that has a biggest discrepancy between the two deals that someone would accept. So why would they have that? Now, one thing that had stuck with me, and this is, again, very speculative, but is perhaps what happened in Ligue 1, in the French league. Maybe they were worried about accepting a bigger deal with someone who has some financial volatility because they haven't been paying their bills, hadn't paid in the rate that they were expected from what the reports are. And maybe they're worried about a Media Pro scenario playing out, which is, for those that followed it, basically Media Pro acquired the rights in Ligue 1 at an inflated level, but then the deal went, I'm trying to think of a non-offensive Australian way of saying it. Basically, it went backwards very, very quickly. And from going from a nice big extra supplemented media rights deal, they basically had to take offer at the fraction of the price. And we now look a cycle on after that deal, they're even in a worse position again financially. So it was that hanging and lingering with the Bundesliga. Perhaps they were worried about what might happen if Bundesliga, after they could burn their bridges with Sky Deutschland, who they've got such a long-standing relationship with. Maybe they were worried about that, about the fact that what happens if something doesn't go right there. Will Sky just, and I can imagine Sky's negotiation skills from what I've seen in the UK are pretty solid. Look, if you go to them, we're not going to be very happy with this. And we've seen what happens in other markets like Canal Plus. Basically got pretty upset with Ligue 1's management of that relationship as well. So that might be one of the reasons why they made that decision in the previous situation. The next bit for me is what happens next. So now that this has been announced that they're going to have to re-tender, we've seen such a dramatic drop and dip in interest in investments in media rights. Will both sides now rethink and reconsider the amount they were going to spend? Maybe Sky Deutschland might ramp up their numbers. They thought they had more negotiation power, but now they don't because of the deal. Maybe Sky Deutschland or maybe even DAZN might say, you know what? Well, actually, with market trends, maybe we don't want to spend as much as we perhaps committed to what is several months ago now, because this situation's been going on for months and months. So I am really interested to see what does play out here, whether or not it's what you would kind of think would be happening logically based on where it was, which is DAZN would end up winning the rights because they're offering them more money, or whether all of a sudden Sky comes in with another offer that gets them much closer to each other enough for them to accept, or what worst case scenario for Bundesliga is that both show less interest in doing the deal at the scale that was discussed before, and all of a sudden those projections are coming down a lot lower. So super fascinating to see what happens here. But as we know, we're in such a weird, volatile state with media rights now, particularly in Europe. We can't bank money like we used to on those types of deals. So I really have this fear that we might see another curveball come.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about this story, and this is just sort of general thoughts, Nick, it's nice because it has been going on for months, so we've been able to speculate and kind of follow. Sometimes we report on stories and it's because it's done, it's over, and we sort of say, why do we think it happened, or what do we think of the deal? It's kind of nice to follow something over the series of months and getting updates and sort of how that story changes. So it's absolutely something we're going to keep our eye on, because as you say, like, chances are, based on the way this story is played out, it's not going to be straightforward by the time it all ends, but it is nice to just kind of follow it along its way. And as you say, is it going to follow down a path similar to Ligue 1 where everything might go completely haywire, or, will we end up with something that's just a bit more vanilla, the way, the Premier League was hoping they'd get all these competitions and bidding wars, and actually just ended up being a pretty simplified deal as before? Well, only time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately what we've seen with Sky Sports in the UK is those respective Sky businesses were in a place of dominance. Sky UK has basically reaffirmed their dominance by becoming more of an aggregator as well. Is that another layer to the Deutschland proposition that they add to the mix as well to push people more of the competition out of the way? We'll have to wait and see.
Now we're going to return to the NFL, and we're going to also double dip our toes into Netflix, which again, really fun, Nick, because I can remember it was coming up on 2 years ago. You and I did a power rankings in Madrid, and we sort of ranked where we thought different OTT players were. And Netflix was one of those. And it'd be really interesting to go rewatch that session. Now, Nick, I think you said at the time you really liked Netflix's strategy because they weren't trying to do sports. It was sort of like they kind of understood where they were. And the fact that they didn't have live sports was actually a good thing because they're so expensive. Could they actually make it work? Did they have the tech stack to make it work? Like, you actually appreciated the fact that they weren't there. And there's always that speculation as to whether or not Netflix would ever do it. And we've seen them start to dip their toes a little bit. They had the golf outing that they did with the Las Vegas Sphere in the background. They've acquired rights with the WWE, but obviously very big news going out and getting something done with the NFL and the Christmas games. And the first part of the story we're going to talk about Netflix is just now that they've said, like, hey, we really want to make something of this. We want to make it a big deal. Never say never about what we'll do in the future about sports, right? We want to make this a big Netflix day. We're going to bring all of our entertainment to make it a thing. And who knows, maybe we'll have a Thursday night package in the future, something like that. So now that we're getting a little bit closer to that, just, is this positive news for the sports world to say that, hey, Netflix is out there and they're spending cash? Like, how do you take it?
Oh man, I have such mixed feelings about this. I would say that it is great for everyone when there's more competition because it means just more money and more time is being invested into sports. So great for those that Netflix is showing an interest in and they're being serious. I really not a fan of the headline, which was planning to Netflixify the NFL. Now, for me, typically when you hear someone say that, the connotation is that they do something that is extra special and that's going to make the experience of watching the NFL Christmas games heightened and more valuable and better for those who are consuming it. But I don't know. Have you watched some of the stuff that they've produced, the live sports stuff and the entertainment stuff they produced? It's okay, but it's pretty rough around the edges at best. I recently watched the Kobayashi. What's that? Joey Chestnut.
Joey Chestnut.
Yeah, and that was actually tough viewing for me to watch. They tried to drag it out, get more value out of it by creating a lot of shoulder content and like talking to lots of people have off stage. I think they even sensationalized it a little bit, and I've seen some other stuff they've done, and I'm just not sure that calling like Netflixifying the NFL is necessarily what I want to see yet. But I can be proven wrong. They are learning as they go. It's just one of the biggest media companies in the world. When you're that big, I don't think you can have a test as you go type of approach. I kind of think you need to be able to deliver excellence from day one. And we have even seen that with what they've done on the golf front. There was a lot of question marks around what they've delivered in there, and I don't think they're going to do that again, if I remember correctly. So, look, it's bringing Netflix closer to what all the other platforms are trying to do. What Amazon does with Thursday Night Football, with Black Friday, what they're going to do with the NBA. So it's clear when there's that fight for attention, Netflix is one to be one of those that has moments where they bring all eyes onto the Netflix platform, particularly in the US. And I believe the Christmas Day game, if I remember, it's a global deal. So they can really become the center of conversation on the Christmas Day for those that are interested in NFL, of course. So I think it's a good move for them generally. I'm really intrigued to see what they produce. I'm also concerned to see what they produce, just given what my experience has been with other things. But they've been getting better as they've gone along.
Yeah, to your point, I wouldn't mess with the NFL model too much. It's been decades long, and it's proven you don't really need to do a lot to screw it up. Just keep it simple, sort of thing. What is it? The KISS logic: keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah,
yeah. So, like, to your point, like, I don't think you need to go over the top to just have a successful day. But I think what's interesting, one of the things that you've talked about in terms of like the streaming strategy and what they see in Tier 1 sports is it's a great way to avoid churn. And I'm not saying Netflix is necessarily losing subscribers, but, for example, like, I'm no longer subscribed to Netflix, but, if all of a sudden they have an NFL package here or there, the WWE's involved, maybe they pick up another package, as you say, like, when the new season of Stranger Things comes out, me and my wife will probably do it because we've watched the first 5 seasons, so we're going to watch the 6th. but I won't probably subscribe until then, or whatever other show might be. But do they build enough of a sports portfolio that maybe they don't have to go all the way in the way CBS and Fox Sports have done to acquire a massive set of rights? But can they acquire enough that, if you're someone that's on the edge about whether you keep that subscription or not, if there just happens to be that event, I'll hold on to it for a little bit. Can they build enough just to do that? Because I think it is going to be tough building with all the different packages, all the subscriptions you need. Can you offer just enough sports so when I have to make that decision as to whether or not I'm going to keep that subscription, it's enough value for me to say I'll hold on one more month?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how much further they go, because the moves they've made have been all out of the blue, or curveball type moves that we've seen to date. Well, I mean, one thing that's going to be interesting on the production side is they've actually got CBS managing the production. In the same way, if you remember, Amazon with Prime Video got NBC to do the production of those rights. So, look, I don't think they're not going to ruin it. They will have a good partner on board, but I'm just a bit concerned as to how much extra layers of gimmick they might be adding to the show, probably around the edges of it. So pre and post show, and maybe even like a halftime, etc., to try and get most value out of it. They are clearly, I think the other layer to all this is they're clearly bought into entertainment over the purity of sports, which in this day and age is probably the right mindset. I think everyone can more or less agree that that's what the world looks for now. So hope the glass half full, they will do something a little bit different, probably lean way heavier into content creators, just entertainment related stuff around the edges of the live game. And then interesting to see how much they do actually with the live experience of the game itself, where they keep it pretty toned down, given CBS is going to manage it. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, speaking of the whole entertainment side of things, that obviously fits in the WWE deal. It also fits into the upcoming Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight, which the interesting bit is they've now struck 5 sponsorship deals for that. It includes Celsius, DraftKings, Experian, MetaQuest, and Spaden. So it's a bit interesting. Like, Nick, I'm sure they make some content that's got product placement. I'd be amazed if they didn't, sort of thing. But all of a sudden, does live sports now provide them with a new way to generate revenue? And this is one of the things I suppose we've talked about, that the sports world's at least learned you can't rely on subscriptions alone, right? If you're just a subscription only business, at some point you're going to reach saturation. So you got to find ways to start diversifying. So potentially sports is a way to start opening up. I know they have an ad model now to get some of that advertisement in, but potentially the sponsorship side helps a little bit. I don't know how much it really impacts their bottom line at the end of the day, but Nick, what do you make of this, having this new sort of sponsorship set of inventory for them to be able to go out and sell?
Well, if you have to compare it to what it does with all the rest of its content, and there is only really 2 methods of revenue, which are, you could bucket them together, is basically it's on content consumption through subscription or advertising. And that's kind of it. They don't really have any other ways of driving revenue other than through licensing out some of the original Netflix content to other shows. This does open up a whole new array of opportunities for them to drive extra and supplementary revenue. You've got pretty significant deal size. The Christmas sponsorship deals were reported to be $5 million advertising packages per advertiser. And that might sound like a lot or not a lot, depending on what you get for that money and how many slots they are selling. But we know through a 4-hour match, there is a lot of ad time in those slots. So if they're selling a 5-minute a slot, that's some pretty heavy inventory to make up and cover some of the direct costs. And we've seen that be a successful model in free-to-air for some time, selling ad on CBS and ABC and NBC as well. So this way of driving new revenue directly from brands is a new area they have not touched before. And if they commit to it, I think it's probably going to be a whole new layer to this that is pretty much unprecedented, to have that layer of subscription paying subscribers funding a business that's hugely profitable, and then adding this layer of extra revenue onto it. They still have a premium position in the market, Netflix. So I think it'll work really well. And it's just one example number 100 of, you can't just lean into live sports and just do it on subscription revenue alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Nick, one story. I don't want to say I'm excited to talk about. I want to make sure I frame this just the correct way. So, Nick, I'm one of those people. It's very common for people to get mad at athletes. I hate how in the UK they talk about football players' salaries, Nick, in terms of like how much they get paid per week. I believe that's a tool to get the people riled up. And then they do the same thing in this professional sports leagues when Jamar Chase is having his holdout. And, I'm not usually a fan of, I'm always pro player. And one of the things I've noticed recently, Nick, in the football world, football, speaking of soccer, is there's too much soccer, Nick. Like, they've expanded the European tournaments. There's the World Cup, there's the Euros, there's a Premier League, there's FA Cup. There's just all kinds of tournaments. And apparently, FIFA is calling an emergency meeting because their upcoming Club World Cup apparently has no media partners, and we're only 9 months out from that. Part of me feels for the players to say, geez, they don't need to play any more games with this, but I find to say that there's no partners, and I know part of it is they're looking for global partners, and we know FIFA has a pretty strong stance on what they think their value is, thinking back to the Women's World Cup and some of the demands they were throwing out there. What do you make of this, Nick? Do you think this is to a degree that FIFA has over considered its position as to what its actual worth is? Do you think part of it is there's a lot of people like Sky or Peacock or DAZN that have already invested in football and other leagues, other tournaments, that they just sort of have run out of money that they can't go out and spend a big wad of cash for another soccer tournament?
Well, we talked a little bit about Champions League with Steve. One of the things we talked about is, I'm pretty sure we talked a little bit about this fleetingly, was the reality versus expectations. And I can't think of a single sports property that is launched from scratch and demanded premiums on media rights. They've had to build up. Now they can possibly accelerate quickly, but I'll wait till you can give me an example of where someone's done it at a rapid pace. Most of them have been in the market for years and years and years. So to think that people are going to pay a premium for the Club World Cup is madness until they've proven that there is an appetite for that type of thing from the market. They haven't made a proof case that fans want more of this sort of stuff. So quite frankly, they will need to probably do whatever they can to give it just as much exposure as they possibly can, do whatever the deal, whether it's free or whatever, just get the visibility out there for this time around. And then once that's done, then they can try and push and prove they've got the proof case to demand the money they expect. Or they demand from broadcast partners. But I think it was absolute madness, particularly for a launch product, to ever consider they're going to get mass interest at that scale to justify the big price tags that they were talking about.
Yeah, so they've come out reportedly saying $4 billion was their target. So as you say, Nick, that is, given this is a one-off tournament, that's not like you're talking about a season of the Premier League with 38 matches that runs from August until May. You're talking about something in a very condensed period of time to basically be asking for $4 billion. And it was reported that Apple was willing to pay $1 billion, so a quarter of what they were asking for. But I don't know. It seems a little bit like the story you're talking about with DAZN and Sky earlier, where are they going to have to go back to Apple saying, hey, yeah, we'll take that $1 billion? And Apple at that stage is like, no. Like, I think it's pretty crazy. I don't need more soccer. There's so much soccer right now. I don't need more of it, Nick. Like, that's just my personal opinion. Like, I don't think anybody feels like this is something I need to have on top of how much soccer already runs 12 months a year.
Yeah, again, it comes back to the bigger question, which is the elephant in the room is, why are we all talking about this? Like, why is this even an idea? Football is the number one sport in the world. And if you're looking at this just as a governing body, accept and embrace the fact you're in the prime position, but thinking more content and more leagues and more games is going to help build more interest in the game is just completely disconnected with what the world is doing right now. It's just going to make football more noisy. What I mean by more noisy is you won't be looking for those moments. The World Cup, the actual main FIFA World Cup, will just pop up all of a sudden. You won't even know it's coming because you'll just be so almost immune to the information and news coming. The more and more games come, you just start ignoring it until maybe something hits you in the face, versus where we were 10, 20 years ago when the calendar was a bit lighter and there was a seasonal approach. People go, okay, this is Champions League time. I'm focused on Champions League. Here's the World Cup time. You would focus in and prioritize that. Now there's just too much going on. So I get why these big major organizations that are so cash rich are trying to look for more ways of just driving more revenue. And they're not probably talking to the right people, if in my view, if they're thinking that this is it, this is actually a winning formula. Now, with the Apple deal, I got approached several times by people asking me for my take. It's probably as much interest in that topic as any that I can remember in recent memory of a deal being announced or a prospective deal being announced. And at the time, I was saying to people like, I don't even know why they would pay $1 billion for that. Now, that's mad, because there's no runs on the board to prove there's going to be any legitimate interest in that. And now we're talking about a $4 billion price tag for everything else. It's insane.
Yeah, very, very insane to me. And, we referenced Apple wanted to be a part of that. And Apple kind of comes up with the next story they want to talk about as well, Nick, which is Apple TV and Amazon Prime coming to an agreement to be able to, collaborate in terms of the content that you can see across those platforms. So now Prime Video subscribers will have direct access to MLS games and the Friday night MLB matchups that are shown on Apple. What I find interesting about this, Nick, and I feel like it wasn't even that long ago where we were talking about DAZN being integrated into Amazon. And I think we had some hesitations as to how much that would work because we had some issues with the user experience on those two platforms. But it does seem Amazon is taking a strategy we've seen with Sky Sports, or Sky in general, over here in the UK, sort of being the home. It's not like you're going to spend all your time in Sky, but we want you to start your journey here. It is interesting to see Amazon continuing to make these sorts of deals where you can go off to other places, you can have access to other people's content, but we want you to kind of go through the Amazon ecosystem to do this.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, Discovery's also done a similar deal with them, perhaps across the European market. So they have found a model. Now, I'm not sure on the specifics on what those types of deals are, whether there is a commitment to a minimum guarantee or a pure shared revenue model that they are offering. But Amazon's found the secret sauce to get everyone to buy the Kool-Aid, to drink the Kool-Aid, and commit to this sort of approach. And it puts them in a great position. One of the big things that stands out for me is, well, a few things. Amazon's approach, I've been really supportive of from day one once I heard they were really focusing on this aggregator approach for a few reasons. One is sports needs it. It's too fragmented. Consolidation is good. The other part is that Amazon's prowess at creating frictionless e-commerce transactions they're better than anyone in the game. So, if anyone who's bought on Amazon knows that you can almost buy things almost accidentally once the way they've set it up. It's one or two clicks and you're done. And that can transfer into the Prime Video experience where they can easily do that. I remember hiring a video once, which was the stupidest idea I've ever done, is hiring a video versus buying it, because then I didn't watch the end of it and then I lost the ability to watch it a few days later. But anyway, I digress. The point is, it was so easy to do it. I would never have considered it if it wasn't literally one click and done. So that lack of friction is what I think really is their secret sauce, is able to make sure that it's as easy as on any platform anywhere in the world to subscribe to their service. And if you think about it, it will be, right? Have you tried to subscribe to any of the other platforms when you don't have an active relationship with them? You're bouncing around from your phone, from smart TV and back and forth to try and get it all synced up and to work. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's very clunky. Well, Prime Video will make it as frictionless as possible. And the next bit of this is also, we're only still at those early stages on the e-commerce front around. We've seen some of that activity in some of Prime Video's own assets around Thursday Night Football and Black Friday, of being able to buy use e-commerce during the live experience. That hasn't yet filtered into the third-party stuff. And that's, I reckon, was what's next to come. If they can bring that to life, then it's such a big win for Prime Video. They're just going to crush it, both from a revenue generation, revenue sharing perspective, but also the ability to turn more users into more buyers across their platform. So I think they're just dominating right now in terms of their market position. Now, the important final bit on that is Prime's not giving you this stuff for free. You still have to pay extra for it. So it's not like, oh, you've now got Apple TV wrapped into it at no cost. Same with Game Pass. But they are making it just easier to spend that extra money, easier than subscribing onto lots of different platforms. And that's key.
Yeah, I almost think of it as you're saying, it's almost like a Trojan horse strategy, right? In the sense of you're being able to not sneak in, you're not trying to, but it's almost that idea of to your point, Nick, it is so easy, you don't even think about doing it. So it's a way of almost sort of skipping through some of those process, some of those loops, and being able to kind of go straight through, where it's almost, yes, you are buying that package, but the way it's presented, the way you go about entering into it, kind of that, for me, it's like that Trojan horse sort of thing. You're kind of like going through the back door sort of thing.
If the e-commerce part plays out like we think it could and should, although we've seen e-commerce take a lot longer to integrate into streaming than many of us expected, but if it can in the coming years, yeah, that's the secret sauce for them. I've seen numbers that we produced a few years ago, on comparing an Amazon customer to a Prime Amazon customer. And the result was, if they became a Prime member, they would spend like 10x on average per year on the platform, or something stupid like that. So to get people onto the Prime platform, get them engaged, they are able to turn those into big spenders on their platform because of that frictionless experience that we talked about. So, yeah, Amazon's got it all the right cards in their hands, and they're not having to fork out the big checks for the massive media rights unless they see an opportunity, and then they'll play that game. I remember talking to Marie Donoghue, and she said that basically she has to go to Jeff Bezos with a one pager on, this is why we need to do it. It's why we need to spend $10 billion on these rights. And it's got to be more than just, it can be financial, but it can also be something bigger. And that's the only time they're going to play a wild card like they've done with the NBA and the NFL by the looks of it.
Yeah. Well, the story we'll finish up on comes from, a good friend of ours. Well, it didn't come from him. We found the story ourselves, and we decided we thought it'd be a good story to talk about. It was our CEO friend, Andreas Hayden at Dyn Media. They had just launched their platform. Nick, I'm not even sure if the platform's been up for 12 months now, but if not, it is kind of coming up on its 1 year. Let's put it this way. I know Dyn Media has been around for long, but I think the actual launch of the platform itself, but they are going through their next round of funding, and they're hoping to be valued as much between 60 to 80 million euros. And I think one of the things to explain about Dyn Media is they are in the German marketplace, they are a streaming platform, but basically they sort of say we're the streaming platform for everything that isn't football. They say at the moment they have no interest in the Bundesliga. Whether that happens in the future, we'll see, Nick. But they want to be the ones that are the home for the rest of all the other sports that exist within Germany. So they've got some interesting propositions in terms of the sports that they want to carry, the people that they're targeting, the pricing strategy. And it seems as though 1 year into the launch of the actual platform itself, Nick, that they're pretty optimistic, pretty hopeful of what that next round of funding could be.
Yeah, definitely. They haven't made any moves to football yet. I think that'll come in down the line, but for now, I think it's a really smart approach. But it needed proper investment. I think what we've seen others try to do similar in other markets of target lower tier sports rights, but they're not back it with the content, the social media effort, the marketing to make sure, and perhaps the partnerships with some of the stakeholders properly to ensure that fans of those sports really understand that this is where they can get it, and they're bringing something new to the table. Normally, what I've seen in the past from other markets is that those lower tier sports, they almost just have a bit of pushback because maybe they had some of the content live on YouTube for a while, and now they're expecting, well, why am I having to pay for it now? So it becomes a whole education process that you need to take. But from what I've seen from the outside in, it looks like Dyn has found a good way to make sure that all the stakeholders are really bought in. Fans seem to be pretty engaged. They've been very targeted what they do on social to ensure they catering to audiences for each specific sports segment they're trying to target. There's a lot to like about their approach. They were also one of the sort of earlier movers in really integrating AI into their production to make sure costs were managed and under control, so they didn't blow out on costs from the beginning. And now they've made more steps to partner and sub-license content to some of the major broadcasters, ARD and ZDF, who are some of the main free-to-air channels out there. So, I've always been impressed with their approach. The question is whether it's driving the revenue that they need to make it work. But it's one of the few models that I can think of that has really built from the ground up both a platform, an approach, and used challenger lower tier sports properties to build something pretty impressive. So I hope they get to see it continue to grow and develop, and hopefully it's driving the revenue that's needed to keep them investing and growing. And it feels like one of the few broadcast platforms that's really ready-made to replicate in other markets if they wanted to, but they don't have to because Germany's still such a big market to focus on.
Yeah, and we talk about them going after smaller sports and things like that, but that's not to say this company doesn't have bigger ambitions. One of the key investors being Axel Springer, a massive, media company. The people that are in that senior leadership team, it's not just Andreas, the former CEO of the Bundesliga has also moved over to that team as well. So these are really smart people being supported by people with deep pockets and experience in media. To your point, Nick, it may not be, going for the Bundesliga today, but like, I personally think the route and knowing the people that are involved in that business, the people backing that business, that they don't have bigger ambitions down the road, but they're building the platform in the right way to be ready for that move when the time comes.
Oh, for sure. They've got great people there, clearly, that definitely know the football business as well and how that operates. Or wouldn't it be a great wild card if they just popped up in that re-tendering process we talked about earlier? And they would need a lot more funding on the table to bankroll that. But that'd be cool if they jumped in and usurped Sky Deutschland and DAZN to some of those rights. But I think it's possibly that's probably a bit of a step too far for them, given that the funding round they're looking to target is more in the 60 to 80. 60 million valuation at this stage. So if they were going to play that card, they'd be probably looking for a lot more money to bankroll that sort of move. But who knows? Let's keep our fingers crossed to see another curveball thrown across the industry.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, that was such a full episode of news. Regardless of which side my microphone was on, left side, right side, doesn't matter. All we do is bring great content.
Well, it helps when the industry is making all these crazy deals and making these moves. It makes our jobs a lot easier. So lots of fun to keep following what's going on in this industry. Like I was only sending you messages just this morning, like, oh, there's another news announcement. Oh, there's another one. I mean, there's a few more that I would even talk about if we had more time. But it's never a dull day in this industry, that's for sure.
Never. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsPro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Streamtimers. Until next time.